Hello, class. Today I want to talk to you about the performance of identity. This is an idea that comes out of it starts with Foucault and looking at how the body is a site of contestation of power. And then Butler says that your sexuality is not something that lives in your mind, but something that you need a body to actually communicate. And then that idea is expanded to the theory that, again, your identity doesn't live in your mind. It needs to be embodied in order to be understood. So we're talking about communication that isn't just about words, but is also about how we move through the world and the choices that we make about what to wear, how to use our gestures. And some of them are conscious and some of them are not. In the piece that students read for this class, Butler's talking about communicating a sexual identity that is not in the dominant one for women or men. So she's talking about transgression of the cultural norms. So we're talking about then how culture is expressed through the body and how we understand things about culture by the way we use our bodies. And I'll tell you one little story about me, and it has to do with the time that I spent living and traveling in Russia. And my fluency in the language got really super good. When I'm in practice, I sound like a person who grew up speaking Russian, but who left Russia and then is now visiting two Russians. When I was living in the Soviet Union, it was a year that I spent doing research. I also traveled around, and Russians would say to me that I sounded like a person from the Baltic republics. So that would be Latvia, Estonia, or Riga. So I sounded like someone who natively spoke Russian. However, anybody watching me walk down the street knew I was American. How did they know? Well, they knew from the way I walked. They knew because of the way Americans are taught to, and we do, tend to smile on the street. We tend to expect that people will smile at strangers. I can't describe it because it is my native way of walking and moving. But it is so distinct from the way Russians living in Russia move that they can instantly tell that you are not a full member of the culture. So I don't know if you've had those kind of experiences where someone has recognized you as some element of your identity that you really weren't communicating to them on purpose, but that they knew. So that's the kind of thing that we are talking about when we talk about the embodiment of identity, and that identity is performed. It isn't necessarily a conscious performance, but we learn from the time we're babies, if we're whatever culture we're born into, we are learning how do we perform that culture. And then we are specifically trained by our loved ones when we deviate from what is what's the range of acceptable embodiments of that culture? Our loved ones will tell us. Our teachers will tell us once we get into school. Our boss will tell us when we're being acculturated to a particular work community. I'm sure at TLU, well, I'm not sure, but it's possible that at TLU you experienced some moments where you realized that what you were doing was not being accepted, and then you had to think about it and adjust. I think that the first year in a new school, whether you are a student or a professor, I think it is being an ethnographer. It is observing how people do things in this culture and then deciding how you want to be, how in that culture of that educational institution. So think about that.